Welcome to the Deep Dive. We turn information overload into, well, hopefully informed insights.
And today we're tackling a big one.
Oh yeah, a book that absolutely exploded onto the scene, got everyone talking Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code.
Right, and we've gathered quite a bit to work with YouTube summaries, a really detailed Wikipedia entry trying to get the full picture of this phenomenon.
So our mission for this deep dive is unpack that central mystery, look at how Brown blended fact and fiction so effectively.
Figure out why it was such a massive hit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And navigate the, let's say, intense controversy it stirred up. I mean, this thing sold millions, right? All over the world.
Billions, actually, and it made things like history, art history, symbology feel like pieces in this giant, thrilling puzzle.
It really did.
And that thrill starts like page 1, middle of the night, Paris. Inside the Louvre, no less.
Yeah, the setup is classic thriller. The curator, Jacques Saunière, found murdered.
But it's how he's found. It's very staged. The sources say his body was posed like Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man.
Yeah, surrounded by cryptic symbols, numbers, and this very specific message. A message basically saying, get Robert Langdon.
Which leads us right to our hero, Robert Langdon, American professor, Harvard. His specialty is religious iconology and symbology.
Sounds tailor-made for this mystery.
Pretty much. The sources paint him as, brilliant, quick-witted, the guy who can just see the meaning in ancient symbols.
But not just a dry academic, apparently. He's got humor, he's pragmatic.
Right, and that interesting quirk, the claustrophobia, adds a bit of vulnerability.
And then there's Sophie Neveu.
Saunière's granddaughter, or niece, depending on which source you look at, but definitely related.
And she's a cryptologist for the French police, so
Yeah.
codes are her thing.
Exactly. Her skills plus the personal connection, she's immediately pulled into this with Langdon.
But things get messy fast, don't they?
Oh, yeah. While they're trying to decode Saunière's clues, the police, especially this Inspector Bezu-Foch, they decide Langdon looks pretty suspicious.
So he's the prime suspect.
Initially, yes. Very much so. Foch is described as quite relentless.
Okay, so it's not just solving a puzzle, it's a chase. They're on the run.
Totally. The plot becomes this mad dash, following the trail Saunière laid out, clues hidden in, famous paintings, artifacts.
Real places too, right?
Oh.
The Louvre, then off to London, Scotland.
Yeah, the specific locations really ground it. Westminster Abbey, Rosslyn Chapel are often mentioned. It gives it that layer of reality.
So what's the big secret they're chasing? What's it all about?
Well, at the heart of it is this ancient secret. And guarding it, supposedly, is a secret society, the Priory of Sion.
Okay.
The book claims this group has been protecting the secret for centuries. And Saunière, the murdered curator, he was the leader, the Grand Master.
Secret society, murdered leader.
Yeah.
And it all revolves around the Holy Grail, I assume.
Yes, but here's the twist Brown introduces. The Grail isn't a cup. Not literally.
It isn't. So what is it?
It represents what the book calls an inconceivable secret, something tied to the term sangreal.
Sangria.
And this is the bombshell, the core controversial idea. The book suggests this secret is about Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene.
Ah, right. I remember the buzz around this.
Yeah, it proposes they had a relationship, maybe even descendants.
Wow. Okay. And the implication is, if that were true.
It could shake the very foundations of Christianity as presented by, say, the Catholic Church. Undermines centuries of doctrine.
That's definitely playing with fire.
Yeah.
So who are they running from? Besides Inspector Fish, there have to be other antagonists, right?
Absolutely. The sources point heavily towards Opus Dei, or rather specific elements within it,
Yeah.
primarily through this character, Silas, an albino monk portrayed as a ruthless assassin.
That sounds chilling.
Very. He's working for Archbishop Aringarosa, another Opus Dei figure, and Silas is also after the Grail secret, which obviously leads to conflict.
So Langdon and Sophie are caught between the police and this deadly faction.
Pretty much. A classic thriller setup.
Are there other key players we should mention?
Definitely Sir Leigh Teabing. He's crucial. A wealthy British knight, totally obsessed with the Grail and the Priory of Sion.
Is he a good guy, bad guy?
That's the thing. He's described as charismatic, super knowledgeable, but also ambiguous. You're not quite sure where he stands initially. Keeps you guessing.
Adds to the tension. So you've got the academic, the cryptologist, the determined cop, the fanatic monk, and this mysterious witch guy.
It's a great cast for this kind of story. And, speaking of why it worked so well, Brown's writing style was a huge part of it.
Oh, for sure. The sources call it cinematic. adrenalinic.
Yeah, short sentences, fast pace. It really does feel like you're reading a movie script sometimes.
And those cliffhangers at the end of almost every chapter made it impossible to put down.
Exactly. You just had to know what happened next.
I think a key point from the sources, though, about its success is how Brown mixed the real and the fictional.
Definitely. He uses actual places, the Louvre, Westminster Abbey, real art by Da Vinci, real organizations like Opus Dei.
Right. And he weaves his fictional plot through them so seamlessly that it gives the whole thing this feeling of plausibility.
It really blurred the lines, didn't it? It made people think, wait, could this actually be true? And it prompted loads of people to actually look stuff up.
Which, ironically, leads straight into the whole phenomenon and the firestorm around it. The book sold, what, over 80 million copies? Insane numbers.
Absolutely phenomenal success. But yeah, that success came tangled up with massive controversy.
It started early, right? With that author's note in the first editions.
Yeah, where Brown claimed the historical elements, the descriptions of art, architecture, secret rituals were all accurate. He used the word veridical, factual.
And historians and religious scholars were not impressed.
Not at all. People like Massimo Intervene came out swinging, pointing out loads of errors, historical mistakes, issues with the interpretation of texts, the whole depiction of the Priory of Zion.
How did Brown react to that?
Well, initially, the sources say he kind of doubled down, claimed the core hypothesis about Jesus and Mary Magdalene was 99% true. But as the criticism mounted, he seemed to shift his position. Later statements framed it more clearly as pure fiction.
It's a paradox, though. The sources highlight this really well.
How so?
Well, while the experts were busy debunking it, the sheer noise, the controversy, the media frenzy, it just propelled sales even higher.
Right. The debate itself became part of the marketing almost.
And maybe unintentionally, it led a lot of readers to actually believe the theories in the book. That these ideas about Jesus, Mary, the church cover-up, that they were hidden history being revealed.
It definitely tapped into a willingness to question established narratives, didn't it? Sparked a huge trend.
Beyond the historical accuracy stuff, there were also questions about where the ideas themselves came from, weren't there? Originality issues.
Yes, big time. Claims surfaced that the central concepts weren't really Brown's own, but heavily borrowed from earlier works.
Like which ones?
The most famous example is the nonfiction book Holy Blood, Holy Grail, published back in '82 by Bagent, Lay, and Lincoln.
What was that about?
Very similar themes. Jesus, Mary Magdalene, a potential bloodline, the Priory of Zion.
And didn't they sue Dan Brown?
They did. Bagent and Lee sued for plagiarism in the UK. It was a huge case.
But Brown won, right?
He did. The judge ruled that you can't copyright historical theories or general ideas, even if they're similar. Facts aren't copyrightable.
But wasn't there something weird with that judge? Like, he put his own code in the judgment?
Yes. That's an amazing little footnote. Justice Peter Smith embedded a coded message in his official ruling.
Seriously, like in the book.
Exactly. People eventually cracked it using Fibonacci numbers, which are key in the Da Vinci Code, and it revealed some message about a British admiral, life imitating art, well, someone else's book, maybe.
That's incredible. Were there other books mentioned as sources Brown might have drawn from?
Yeah, the sources list a few others. The Jesus Scroll from the 70s, the Templar Revelation, an Italian one called Il Mistero della Pergamena.
And interestingly, some of those, like Holy Blood, Holy Grail, are actually mentioned in the Da Vinci Code itself.
Right. They're listed as being in Sir Leigh Teabing's library in the novel, which is a clever touch, perhaps.
It is important, though, to distinguish the real Priory of Zion from the one in the book.
Oh, absolutely. The sources are clear on this. The actual Priory of Zion was founded much later, 1956, by a guy named Pierre Plantard.
And he wasn't claiming descent from Jesus.
No, his aims were different, and those secret dossiers that supposedly proved the ancient lineage, they were later exposed as fakes, created by Plantard himself. It's miles away from the powerful, ancient secret society Brown depicts.
So Brown took real names, real places, bits of real organizations, and then layered his fictional story, pulling ideas from various existing theories onto that framework.
That seems to be the recipe, and it worked incredibly well in terms of impact. The book wasn't just a book for long.
Right. The movie adaptation, big Hollywood film with Ron Howard directing, Tom Hanks as Langdon.
Yep. And a video game, too. It saturated the culture.
It even spawned parodies, didn't it?
Yeah.
Which is always a sign you've hit the big time.
Definitely. When people start making fun of you, you know you've made it.
So, wrapping up this deep dive then, we've walked through the plot, that super controversial core idea.
Explored how Brown mixed the real and the fake, why it sold so incredibly well.
And navigated those big controversies, the historical accuracy debates, the plagiarism claims.
It's quite a story, both inside the book and around it.
Absolutely. And whether you see the Da Vinci Code as just, a really entertaining thriller or as something that genuinely challenged people's views on history and faith.
It undeniably got people talking all over the world about history, about belief, about symbols and their power. It made people look closer.
And maybe that's the final thought to leave you with. The Da Vinci Code is such a powerful example of how a compelling story, even one that's fiction, can really shift how we look at the past.
Right. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much of what we accept as historical fact is actually shaped by the narratives we're told? And, maybe more importantly, how willing are you to question those narratives?